We know that students need direct writing instruction, but we don't want it to be boring or formulaic. So in this episode, I am interviewing an amazing educator named Thomas Bussey, who has some great tips for you on how you can make it really engaging for your students while still focusing on those writing skills that your students need. You're going to hear so many great tips from Thomas. I learned a lot. I know you're going to learn a lot. When you are done listening to this episode, make sure that you give him a follow because he has some great content on his Instagram and he really just shares his joy of loving teaching, and it really comes through on there as well as in the interview. All right, let's get straight into the interview and learn more about how we can make writing engaging for our students while still teaching those skills that they need. Hey, Thomas, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today. I was wondering if you could start by telling us a little bit about what you're teaching this upcoming school year. I know you start Monday, so that's exciting.
Yes. I'm going into my 15th year and I will be teaching fifth grade ELA. So this is my 6th year teaching fifth grade. But for the last 4 years, I've been doing exclusively ELA. So
that's my favorite. And I love fifth grade. That's the grade level I started in, and that's the grade level I ended in. So it was really nice to, and I wanted to be a first grade teacher. Actually, just talked to our last guest about this because she's a first grade teacher, and I ended up being a fifth grade teacher and just absolutely fell in love with it. So I think it's so fun. Yeah. So can you share a little bit about your journey into teaching and what really has inspired you to focus on making it fun for students? I know you do a lot of themed activities. You dress up a lot, which I think makes ELA a lot more exciting, especially writing, because I know that teachers are concerned that direct writing instruction can be a little dry.
Right. Yeah. Well, one, I've always known I wanted to be a teacher, like since first grade. So that all the way through school growing up, I would, be sitting in second grade and I'd say like, oh, I'm going to do that when I'm a teacher, or I'm never going to do that. And so it's just kind of been my thought process for a long time. And then I think I do the things that I enjoy myself. And so dressing up in costumes, and I do a lot of gamification. We do kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons style game. Like if I wasn't doing it in my classroom, I'd be, nerding out in somebody's basement somewhere doing the same thing. So it's more so just kind of bringing my authentic self to the classroom. And I know that those things do make a big difference, right? I'm able to get them to be excited. And when their emotions are heightened, I think that it helps transfer that information to their long-term memories.
Yeah, I completely agree. And ELA is so much fun, in my opinion, because I'm a huge nerd and I'm a huge book nerd and I've always loved reading. But I've gotten classes in the past that come in and they're like, ugh, ELA. Like they really are excited about science and math, but they hate reading. And it's crazy to me because part of it, I think, is these are students that are coming from classrooms where they're doing just a lot of like textbook work and they're not, nothing's being gamified. There's no theme. There is no dressing up. There's no excitement. And so that makes me sad. But my goal was always to make it really exciting. And since I love reading and I love nerdy things too, that was always a part of my classroom as well.
Yeah.
So I know that you teach both reading and writing. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that your students have on the writing side of it and some ways that you gamify or just make it a little more interesting when you're teaching writing?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges, my school, the curriculum that we had been using focused a lot on generating ideas, but not really a whole lot on kind of the rules and the structure. And so when I got there, I was like, I had a hard time even understanding some of what was being written. I'm like, okay, I know that the great idea is there. And when I would talk to them about it, I'm like, this is actually brilliant. Like you have 3 great reasons to support your idea, but I didn't get any of that in what you wrote. And so it became, about how can I help them not just come up with the ideas, but how do I help them structure it in a way that it's easy for their reader to understand. So you're actually conveying your ideas. So I think one of the most important things because motivation was a big factor as well, big challenge. So one of the most important things for me is kind of giving them a why and helping them understand, why am I teaching you this, right? Why do I So on the first day of school, one of the first conversations we have is, why do I teach you vocabulary? We're going to spend a lot of time on that. Why am I teaching you all of this about writing? And most of them will say, of course, because we have to pass a test at the end of the school year. Like, okay, yes, that's true. I want you to pass. But it's not just about that. And so I'll ask them, raise your hand if you've ever had an idea where you knew you were right and there was an adult who was wrong, but they weren't listening to you. Every kid in the room raises their hand. They've all had that experience. And my job here is to not just help you pass the test, but to help you become a better writer, because your idea might be great, but you're not communicating it in a way that an adult can receive it. And so we have to improve our vocabulary. We have to know how to write so that when you are trying to convince your mom to, let you play Fortnite a little bit later, you know how to structure that argument and, help them understand what you mean. And you're more likely to get the things that you want. And so that conversation right from the beginning, I think, spurs them to want to get better at it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it makes me think of a situation with my daughter recently who's 8, and she writes little notes that when she gets upset with us, she writes notes and she explains to us why we're wrong, and it's great. I'm keeping all of them.
Yeah.
But she wrote one a couple weeks ago that had a lot of spelling, grammatical issues, and I came out, I said, I can't read this, so I don't know what you're trying to say. And so we had a conversation and we sat down and we rewrote it. Of course, the whole note was her being upset with me, but we rewrote it.
Yeah.
And so it was readable. And I said, okay, I see your point. I think that you have a really good point here. Now that I can read it, it's, it makes sense. And I agree with some of these things. So I think that a lot of our kids don't get those connections at home because they don't have teacher parents, right?
Right.
So a lot of times they see writing as this thing that we just have to get done so we can turn it into the box where it goes. Who knows where it goes, right? Like the turn-in box, right?
And then never see it again. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's so important to talk to our students about these things, as well as making sure that when they are writing, we're talking about having an authentic audience. And we can use, we can use box curriculum, or we can use prompts. We can use a lot of different things and still have an authentic audience so that our students know, this is, let's say we're writing about a community issue, making a slight tweak to write to a community member or, a city council member or something that's actually going to make a difference. And I think that makes a big difference too. Whereas a lot of times teachers get rushed because they just have to get everything fit into their ELA block. And a lot of times they end up just trying to get students to write as fast as possible. And then it goes into that turn-in box and then it's never seen again. And so that's definitely an issue. It sounds like you're putting a really good focus on writing in your classroom, which is making a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. Like having that authentic audience, I think is huge. And also, even when we give them prompts that they can actually be interested in. And and you're not always going to write about something that you want to or something you're going to be excited about. So again, like if I can wear a costume or do something to make that more interesting, I think that also goes a long way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Wearing a costume just makes everything more fun. I think that just makes such a positive classroom environment. I don't know. I saw a couple on your Instagram. I think I saw one that was like a collage of all of the ones that you wore last year.
Oh yeah.
And I was just thinking, I would have loved to be in his classroom. It didn't even matter what you were teaching because it's just so interesting. And our kids, they really do thrive on routine, but they also thrive on, that engagement of my teacher's doing something weird.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes people will try to overdo the silly stuff and miss that stands out because of the routine. And so they thrive in that routine. And then the day that you show up dressed like a dragon, it's like, whoa, wait, what's happening today? Like, and it really is what makes it special.
It is. Yeah. And I was just having this conversation with my husband about, because my kids are going in 3rd grade, and I feel like I'm very concerned that they are going to lose that love for learning as they get into the older grades when things aren't as exciting.
Yeah.
And so knowing that you're still bringing that excitement into your classroom in fifth grade, I think is awesome. And I was the same way. And even when I taught sixth graders, they thought I was weird and they made comments, but they loved it. And that
Yeah.
I wish that we brought that excitement and engagement to every year, all the way through high school. I think that would
Yeah.
make our kids really love learning.
Yeah. I agree.
So we know that you have a really positive community in your classroom. Is there anything in particular you do at the beginning of the year to really cultivate that positive community, whether it's around writing or just in general?
Particularly around writing. I mean, in general, we do a lot of icebreakers, a lot of get to know you kind of things. I do a lot of those surveys at the beginning to try to learn as much as I can about them. And then I think me being my authentic self kind of creates that space for them to do the same. And so when your teacher shows up wearing a silly outfit or can trip and fall and laugh about it, it just kind of creates that environment where everybody can do that. With writing, we talk about radical kindness. We talk about that all with everything, right? So not just being kind, but going out of your way to be extra kind, but then balancing that out with radical candor. And so I tell them the Brene Brown quote, kind is clear and clear is kind. And so when we're giving each other feedback and when you read somebody's writing, it's not kind to tell them, oh, this is so great, knowing that they have 15 misspelled words and you saw them and you're like, oh, it's wonderful. Here you go, knowing that they're going to lose points. So you do have to tell them the truth, but you don't have to do it in a way that is going to hurt their feelings. So you can give them, here are the things that I really love about this or that you did really well. This would be stronger if you add, if you double check your spelling or whatever it may be. And so once we get in the practice of that, I think they do a good job overall of giving each other feedback, and it just kind of becomes a part of what we do.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of the feedback part, I think that's what's missing a lot in classrooms that I think most teachers could add in very easily. That would make a big difference, not only in the quality of their writing, but with the enjoyment of the experience. Because a lot of times we are too focusing on rushing through writing, so students aren't really having the opportunity to go back and make their writing better. And as a part of having them give and receive feedback with their peers, those discussions that happen during that time are really engaging and fun, because then they're getting that joy of someone else reading their writing and providing feedback and then making it better. And I think that collaboration is what makes it more authentic, because of course anyone who writes anything is going to get feedback before publishing it. We know that's
right. Mm-hmm.
the case. And it's not always going to be kind or make you feel great, because you will have to make some changes. I know getting back my book manuscript last year and there's, 4,000 comments that you have to go through was a lot, but but it's also really exciting to see someone read your work and have some comments and say, okay, I really liked this part, but this part wasn't clear. Can you make this more clear for me? And then you can make it clear for that real life person. And then you feel really good because you really made it great for someone who's reading your work. So I think that is key. And I love that you brought up feedback, because that's something a lot of teachers ask us about, which is, when do we have students give and receive feedback when we have such limited time? And my answer is always, whenever you possibly can, at all stages of writing, every day if you can, anytime anyone's stuck or finished early. I never had a very quiet classroom because we were always doing that. So I think that's great that you include a lot of peer feedback.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the direct instruction piece, because you talked a lot about making things exciting, but that you need direct instruction too. We have a lot of teachers who are concerned before they start giving direct writing instruction that it can be formulaic or boring for students. So if you want to talk to that point for a little.
Yeah. One, I would say, I think sometimes people are so focused on trying to be entertaining, And there's a difference between entertainment and engagement. So like watching Princess Jasmine on Aladdin is entertaining, but going to Disney World and like actually interacting with her and getting her to sign an autograph and taking a picture, that's engaging, right? And it's something that you're going to remember years and years down the line, even if you don't remember all the words to the movie or whatever it may be. And so when we talk about engagement, it requires kind of that back and forth. And so when I do direct instruction, last year I gave one of the first sets of notes my students took was on like prefixes and suffixes. And I'm just on a document camera. I don't have a presentation. There's no costume. There's no nothing but discussion and me asking them questions and giving them opportunities to turn and talk to each other and those things. And when they're done and they have 2 full pages of notes, one of the students was like, "That was fun." It's like, it was. And I'm not even, thinking about it in that way. But, I find that a lot of students, especially my homeroom last year, when we did the Myers-Briggs at my last school, one of the things I learned was that I was an extroverted thinker. And my homeroom last year was full of extroverted thinkers. Like they had to get the ideas out. And then that's how they formulated the ideas. Like they solidified their ideas by saying it, and then they could write it. Because now I have a real idea. And so balancing that for them, those students who need to talk about it first, and then they can write. And so they get to do those turn and talks. But then you also have those students who are introverted thinkers, who I need to write down my thoughts first, and then I can talk to you about it. But let me just jot it down first. And so kind of going back and forth and having that mix of strategies. And then I think everything is boring when you're not good at it. So even when I played Fortnite for the first time, I was like, this game is horrible. I'm losing in like two minutes. And then I'm talking to the students about it, and they're like, did you build a fort? It's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But you can build forts to protect yourself. And then I started learning the rules, and then it started to actually get fun. And I think the same applies for reading, for writing. When we don't have the skill and you're just given a piece of paper or a computer and you're just told to do it, it's not going to be fun. But once you have the skills and you're able to kind of strategize the same way you would in a video game, those same things can be a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I know that our students who are really struggling as readers and writers, they're the ones that tend to be the most disengaged because it is the most difficult for them.
Yeah.
So those are the ones we really need to reach to make sure that they have that scaffolding so that they can still be involved. Right. And I know I was recently modeling a lesson, and it was a grammatical lesson on coordinating conjunctions. Absolutely boring, just like the example you gave. Such a dry topic. But I was modeling and I was putting commas in weird places, and the kids just loved it. They were giggling, and I was just being very playful with them. I was saying, hey, let me finish. They're all laughing at me. They're talking to each other. They're like, oh my gosh, she doesn't know how to use commas.
Yeah.
They just thought it was the funniest thing. And I'm like, hold on, let me finish. And then they were just so antsy, like to just get in there and tell me what I did wrong. And
right.
That's not even a really complicated teaching strategy, right? We're just modeling making mistakes in front of them, and they love it. So that engagement is it's not super difficult to include in your lessons. You just have to think about how are we going to present this in a way where the kids are actively involved. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think grammar is probably the most boring subject to teach. So I found that really teaching it in the context of their writing is so much easier. And studies show that that's better anyway, and they're going to actually engage more with it in that situation. But that was just something I recently modeled because so many teachers struggle with their students really getting it. And also it's just so boring and dry. So I was really excited when everyone was laughing and giggling, because that was really what I was looking for.
Yeah. I think too, having those, when you make your visuals and things like that, trying to find ways to make them more interesting and engaging, I think that goes a long way too. I know, our older generations are like, well, everything is not going to be all fancy looking, but now, you go into McDonald's It's not just words up there anymore. Even the menu is, they show the steam coming out of the food, and everything is a screen and it's interactive. And then they come to school and we're like, I have a black and white PowerPoint presentation to click through. And, there's no wonder we're losing them. So there's all sorts of resources out there. I use Canva mostly because they give you have motion backgrounds and things where you can, keep it visually appealing and make it interesting.
Yeah, Canva is great. And you definitely spoke to me talking about, prior generations where we do have like a small group of people who say like, we should keep education the same because, we did well with this and we learned to read and write. We had no problems, but we do have to update things for the times. And you're right. Everything is very visual now. And even back then, I think visuals would have been helpful for many students. We just didn't know as much about meeting students where they were. So we were just giving the same lesson to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we have to update our teaching and lots of visuals is great. I love Canva. Canva is amazing. My daughter loves making graphics in Canva and she does some of her writing in there. So I love it for students as well. And even my son, who doesn't really love computers, likes getting in there and he'll, instead of doing his writing, he'll show images and then we'll do sentence starters because he has dyslexia. But that allows him to be able to produce work and share what he wants to share without necessarily needing to write a whole paragraph.
Right,
so I think we can use that in the classroom in so many different ways.
Yeah, for sure.
So what role do you think student choice plays in making writing more enjoyable? Because we do have to teach step by step what they need to do to write.
Right.
But where does that choice come in and how can we provide choices while still scaffolding and guiding them through the process?
Yeah, it can be really challenging, especially when, you have all sorts of different topics and everybody's writing about different things. But I do think that students are more invested when they choose their own, what they want to write about. And I also know that I can't, like I said earlier, I was talking about my conversation with them at the beginning of the school year. I can't say I'm here to help you strengthen your voice so that you can, share your ideas and then spend the rest of the year saying, this is the only thing you're allowed to write about. It's what I tell you to write about. So I have to back that up with the opportunity for them to actually, share their own original thoughts and whatever you want to talk about. So I find that when I am initially introducing a topic, it's much easier for everybody if I give them a prompt and we're all kind of on the same thing. And then once they have the skill, just like talking about playing Fortnite, if I just kind of threw them out there and just said, well, just write about it, I don't think it would be nearly as much fun as now I have this skill that I get to apply to my own interests and my own choice. And so after we've practiced it and we've learned whatever the skill may be, then we can go ahead and, I can give them a little more freedom and choice, which still there are students who are like, I have no idea what to write about. And so it's still good to come up with original prompts or, funny prompts and things like that, or sentence starters, like you said, to at least get the ideas going. And then a lot of them still need that.
Yeah. And I feel like the best prompts are ones where there's options in the umbrella of the prompt.
Yeah.
So if they're, if we're writing about a community issue, that gives them all sorts of issues to pick and choose from.
Right.
And they can go home and talk to their parents because, as adults, we have lots of complaints about our communities. So there's lots to share. They can talk to their classmates. And so there's a lot of ways they can generate ideas and find out what they're interested in.
Yeah.
Beneath that umbrella of that prompt, while still staying on topic. I think that's the hardest part is a lot of curriculums we see will give idea generation type content, but then there's really no pre-planning about what types of writing they're doing, or they're just kind of like doing an umbrella map. I don't know if this was like my first experience with writing when I first started teaching. Was they're like, okay, give your students an umbrella map and on the top put like small moment and have them come up with all these different small moments. And my students were like, they couldn't do it. Like some had big moments, some were even real, like they were fictional, like there was no
right.
That's where I realized like we have to give some guidance to what they're really writing about, you know, like, okay, let's write about something that happened on the playground. You know, it's kind of more making the prompt a little more specific is very helpful. That was bad. That was a bad example, but you know what I'm saying.
I definitely agree. I think that they need that. We kind of, a lot of times teachers will fall into the curse of knowledge. Like we know we have these big ideas and these skills. And so there are certain things that we forget what it's like to be 10. And, you know, we're like, oh, this is a great prompt. Like, here, go for it. And they're like, wait, what are you even talking about? I think that was a good example.
I love that. The curse of knowledge. I'm going to use that because that's so accurate. And that's, I think, why we see some students struggle, especially as they get into high school and they're working with teachers in these really complex subjects who know all of it and therefore have no idea how to reach their students who know none of it. And so that's
exactly.
And I think being a teacher or being someone that like writing isn't their best subject. So for me, I'm a really great reader and I'm really good at math, but my weakest subject was always writing. And people are always surprised when I say that because it's what I do. I teach teachers how to teach writing.
Yeah.
But I was coming from a place where writing, especially fictional writing, confused the heck out of me as a student. And I just never felt like I was good at it. And so coming from that position, I think made me a better writing teacher. Whereas math was a little frustrating because I knew how to do I knew how to do math. I knew how to show it. So but my students really struggled when they were coming into me. So it's interesting.
I had the same experience. Reading was a challenge for me more than math was. And so math, when I teach it, I'm like, when they're like, I don't understand this. Like, how do you not understand it? Like, it's hard for me to conceptualize how you don't get this because I just explained it perfectly. But in reading, I think I have a much deeper understanding of like when they don't get it because I've been there. But even though it wasn't my strength in school, I think that helps me be a better teacher for them.
I completely agree. And I'm going back, and when we found out that my son had dyslexia, you know, we are just a bunch of readers. And all of our family is just a bunch of readers. So we just didn't really know where to help. And it actually brought me back to getting my master's in literacy and really studying dyslexia and dysgraphia. And also I got to learn a little bit more about struggling readers and writers, which was great. And I just thought that was so interesting to learn something that was completely new to me because I had no idea what it was like to struggle in reading. And I wish that every teacher was able to get that training and that background because we have so many struggling readers. And it should not have taken me that long to do it. But, you know, that inspires you when you have a child who struggles. And,
Absolutely.
And of course, had many, many students who struggled with reading and writing when I was in the classroom too, and a lot of English language learners. And so it's been a very interesting journey to learn more about that.
Yeah.
So what final advice would you give to teachers who are just struggling to make writing instruction fun and engaging for their students?
My final advice, one, I think it's important to remember to be your authentic self. Don't just try to, you see the guy in the costumes on Instagram. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be your way of doing it. But using your relationships that you form with your students and being your authentic self, I think goes a long way. I also use a lot of ChatGPT for ideas. And so, my students, Pokemon was the thing in my class last year. And so even if I took a lesson that, that was scripted or, pre-written, I could take those ideas or whatever I'm teaching and plug it into ChatGPT and say, turn this into a lesson that incorporates Pokemon, or use Pokemon to help explain this content. I can ask it to tell me what to put on a PowerPoint presentation, what images to include, those things. And I'm not going to necessarily copy and paste what ChatGPT says. but it at least gives me an idea of ways that I can make connections between their interests and what I'm trying to teach. And when we make those connections, that's how we get to that long-term memory. I want you to still have this skill when you walk out of my room at the end of the day and at the end of the year. So I'm trying to find all of those ways to make those connections. And if you are not a natural, you just come up with ideas on the spot, that's a great way to get them.
Yeah, I completely agree. ChatGPT is a lifesaver for teachers who are just trying to come up with ideas or outlines or just a general sense of lessons, because you get so stuck. Yeah. I get so stuck on ideas, especially after a long day. So it's very nice to have it kind of outline, or at least give you some ideas, and maybe it'll give you 20 and most of them are horrible, but one really speaks to you. You can kind of go from there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I love what you said about, don't just, see this guy who's wearing costumes on Instagram and think that that's all that's happening. And I think that's very apparent in our conversation, is that you're a very good teacher, and the costumes are just an add-on, right? It's just there for excitement, to make you enjoy it as well as the students. Exactly. And so I think sometimes we see things on Instagram where teachers are being very themed, or they're dressing up, but you don't know where that content is. Is there actually something that's standard aligned there? So I think that's really important to keep in mind, is the costumes and the fun things are really a support for the engagement, but they're not what it's all about. So I think the most engaging thing is them actually having the skill. I enjoy writing, but I think it's because I have the skills. Like, I love writing a story, but I know what it takes to get a good story. And so once I start writing it, I'm applying the skills that are in my long-term memory. I have all that working memory and all that space to generate new ideas and to be creative. And that's what makes it fun. So it is important for them to learn the skill in order to make it, engaging. I completely agree. So tell us how people can find you to learn more about making learning engaging and see all of the great costumes that you wore last year.
I am on, Twitter, now X, on at the Best Educator. And then, but my main place where I post is on Instagram. Still same handle, the Best Educator. And then if you would like to follow me on TikTok, it is at Mr. Bussey, MrBussey. And that is really just there because my students aren't supposed to be on there and aren't supposed to be following me, but I know that they are. And so I'll post things on there where I'm like, it's really to drop hints to them about like what's something that's coming and to get them excited. And so like, I'll just, even if it's just me, posting a story on there or whatever, where I'm showing the tie or some part of a costume, and they'll come in and like, wait, what was that you posted? Like, you're not supposed to be on my TikTok, my business, but I can tell they're getting excited about whatever's to come. So
I love that. You're tricking them into learning. They're like, They know they're not supposed to be on there, but they're on there. So you're using it to your advantage. That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And I think everyone should go follow you because you have so many great ideas. And I'll post everything in the show notes so people can find you as well.
All right. Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.